Oh, okay. Sorry about that. So good morning, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order. It's 10 o'clock. Well, actually 10:01. First, we'll recognize that we're on the unceded territories of the Shuswap and Cheshire First Nations, and we're grateful for their opportunity to be here. And I'd also like to recognize we have directors phoning in from other areas and First Nations, and we'd like to acknowledge them with respect and gratitude as well. And a reminder that this meeting is going to be recorded and live streamed to YouTube. So first of all, we'll do introductions to everyone who's in the room. I'm Debbie Haggard, Vice Chair of the Regional District. Our chair is at another meeting today, but he might be able to join us later on this afternoon. So we'll just go around the room and we'll start with Director Boyko. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Good morning, Director Boyko, representing Beaufort. Good morning.
Bob Schmidt, alternate director for Banfield.
Penny Cody, Sprout Lake Electoral Area Director.
Susan Roth for Beaver Creek. And then we'll start with staff. Start with Daniel.
Daniel Sayan, the Chief Administrative Officer for the ACRD.
Terry Fong, Chief Financial Officer for the ACRD.
Mike Herg, I'm the General Manager of Planning and Development for the Regional District.
Good morning, Wendy Thompson, General Manager of Administrative Services for the Regional District.
Thank you. And we have agenda in front of us. Could we have a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Moved by Director Boyko. Could I have a seconder? Second by Director Roth. Any comments? All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion carried. So we're going to have a fun-filled day, and we're going to talk about one of the most important things an elected official is going to do every year is work through the financial plan. So I guess we'll start off with our Terry.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to go straight to this. Okay, so I'm going to kick off this day. So the intent today is to get the draft 2023 to 2027 financial plan to the board for discussion. We present the entire financial plan package at one time, and then we will break it into sections moving forward. So today you will hear from many of our GMs and discussing the services. And we're just going to figure out. So just a few rules regarding financial plans before we get going. We must annually adopt a 5-year, which is a current +4 financial plan. And we have to have a budget for each service, including expenditures, revenues, and transfers to and from reserve accounts. Our expenditures must not exceed our revenues. We must have a public consultation portion before we adopt, and we have to be done all this by March 31st. Our bylaw can then be amended at any time after that, but as of March 31st, we can't change the amount we need to requisition from our member municipalities, First Nations, and from the public. So the service financial rules of a regional district are slightly different than that of a municipality in that the areas are only charged for the services they are provided. So our financial plan is actually a summary of many smaller budgets. Services are independent. We can't transfer revenues and expenditures between them. And then the allocation of these costs must include staff time. So we have to allocate our estimated based on our work plan, the amount of staff time to each service. And now it won't let me click. So how do we develop our financial plan? We take the operational costs of our existing services. We have considered the 2021 to 2024 ACRD strategic plan, which was created by the previous board. We have asset management plans in place for all of our services that have infrastructure, and we are attempting to begin to close those gaps. Those gaps are large in the majority of our services. And our goal is to always adopt a plan that includes an allocation of resources that can achieve the outcomes while remaining responsive to changing social, environmental, and financial needs during the year. So of course, there are some things that are going to pop up during the year that we just can't anticipate at this point. There was no larger focus of that in the year that COVID hit, for sure. So what is this process going to look like? So today our agenda will be to have all of the departments present. We're going to start with the hospital district. It is a separate legal entity, but because they have the same taxpayers, we do like to talk about it at this meeting. Then we're going to move on to planning and development, and then to emergency services, fire services, community services, and then administrative services. We are bringing in lunch for noon, and we haven't really, it's just going to be wherever it lands. We haven't determined what's before lunch and after lunch, so we'll just see how the flow goes. On February 22nd, we will discuss all the grant and aid applications that we have received for 2023. And then in the afternoon on the 22nd, I will do a condensed version of this plan to be part of our public consultation process and have an opportunity for the public to provide input before we kind of get into the rest of the meeting. Then we take the sections that are like, there's multiple jurisdictions in one service to the different committees. So the AV&B will discuss all of the services that are Alberni Valley and Banfield wise. At the electoral area meeting, we will discuss the ones that are just paid for by the electoral areas. So those will both occur on the February 23rd. On March 1st, we'll do the West Coast Committee and discuss the West Coast services. And then at the Committee of the Whole on the morning of March 8th, we'll do the ones that are region-wide. So our 911, general government, regional parks and planning. We will also in that afternoon give first reading to the actual bylaw. So there's the plan and then there's the bylaws. The plan that you're seeing today has all the narrative attached to it and explanations. The bylaw itself is really just the numbers portion of that. So we'll give first reading on the 8th, same with the hospital district. And then on March 22nd, we can adopt the plan or we can book another meeting if we want a little bit more time to make some more decisions. All that by March 31st. From a public consultation portion, we're kind of getting back to pre-COVID times where we're actually going to have an open house on Monday, February the 13th from 5 to 8 p.m. at Cherry Creek Hall. This is not just for Cherry Creek residents. This is for anyone who's interested in the regional district financial plan. So we'll go from 5 till 8, but we'll actually do a presentation of the plan at 7 o'clock if people are more interested in a formal presentation. In addition to that, all of our ACRD board and committee meetings are live streamed to YouTube and to the website. People are welcome to come sit in the gallery. And we've set up a specific email for the financial plan. So if there's questions or comments, they can be emailed to budget@acrd.bc.ca. We will also do community presentations if you have a group or an organization you want us to present to. So Spartan Lake Community Association, we're presenting to on February 27th. We're presenting to Banfield Community Affairs on whatever the day after Family Day is. Can't remember the date. But yeah, happy to come and present if you have a community group or something. And we'll also reach out to the municipalities to see if they're wanting presentations to their councils.
Terry, did you want the directors to attend the open house?
You are more than welcome to attend. Attendance is definitely not mandatory, but and we do have some feedback forms that we are going to have there, and we'll be sharing that feedback with the directors, but definitely welcome to come stay for the whole thing, come for part of it. Happy to have you there for sure. Okay, so now I'm going to pass it on to our CAO to just discuss our existing strategic plan and the focus areas that are going to be our focus for this year. It doesn't matter, you're there.
I think I might just sit here and it's still the large screen. And if you can move things forward, Terry, as we go through, it'd be great. Thank you. I'll also flag just one little housekeeping issue that we should note for anyone who's watching is we are going to take a 30-minute break, and it's a separate link for the afternoon session. We just weren't able to have a continuous streaming on the same link with a 30-minute pause. So because of that, logistically, we have two different links. So, and they're both at the same location on the webpage. So it's just when we take that break, we're going to lose the people that are watching, and then you sign back in 30 minutes after. Our strategic plan is our 2021-2024 strategic plan. So we've been working on it for just a couple of years. It's our third year now, and advancing a number of different initiatives. The initiatives that I'm flagging today are those that are pertinent to what we're actually working on in 2023. There's a larger plan that can be viewed online, but I'm not going through the entire plan today. So strategic objective 1.1 is social procurement policy. And we started by first creating a procurement section of our financial department and addressing various policies that are directly related to procurement. But this year in 2023 is really the next step towards developing a social procurement policy following educational sessions that are provided by the BC Social Procurement Initiative. Under leveraging Community Works Funds, the CWF, and other grants, this year we're really looking at advancing the development of a policy for grant prioritization and procedures for departments to provide information to respond to grant opportunities. I'll flag that grants are an important part of this year's budget. They've been an important part of last year's budget as well. And the requirements attached to grants are not getting smaller, nor are the volume of opportunities for grants at this time. So it's an important area of our work. Under 1.3, improved broadband and cellular service, this one is really ongoing. We continue to advocate senior government levels and private sector for improved internet and cellular service to remote areas in the region. This year we are seeing some forward motion in the areas of Spread Lake, supported by the province and TELUS, and we are also seeing some forward motion in the areas of Bamfield. That said, we are going to continue to evaluate service options and grant opportunities leading forward this year and into 2024. Under enhanced agricultural development, our largest objective here was really an advocacy role with the Ministry of Agriculture and Agricultural Land Commission to reduce regulations that restrict or impede development and operation on agricultural lands. This includes supporting agricultural initiatives such as water supply, irrigation, farm gate programs, and farmers markets. Our recommended area of focus for this year includes continuing with the Systems Change Initiative that has been funded by the Vancouver Foundation. We are halfway through, actually, so that is a 3-year grant program. We're 18 months through. And we're going to continue with the implementation of Alberni Valley Agricultural Plan and Coastal Addendum. I will flag that the work under this area has also been basket woven into our work with our bylaw for the new zoning across the region, as well as our OCP updates. Under 1.5, parks and trails levels of service. This is an ongoing service review of the levels levels of service that we provide to our parks and trails. Here we're looking to maximize their wellness values and the benefit to economic development. And it was also tied into our COVID-19 recovery. This year specifically, we're working on the Log Train Trail Management Plan, Parks Construction Guidelines, Park Commission review, including development of procedural guidelines. Next slide, please. Under 2.1, we have our media engagement, and here we were seeking out and have been working to collaborate with the media to enhance the provision of information to the public. A communications plan is on the docket this year. This is really the larger element that we're looking to have done. I should take a step backwards. In 2022, we hired a communication person and started building the foundation blocks to a communications department, a department of one, but a mighty one nonetheless. And this year we grow on that with the plan. Under up 2.2, which is to optimize website and social media. Here we wanted to enhance the ECRD website and expand on the use of social media platforms for public communication. And although we did open up last year a few social media chains so that we're actually present on social media, this year, our focus is really on the redesign of the website, and we expect that to go live end of February, early March. So we flag spring of 2023. Under 2.3, communications and engagement support. Here it's to obtain services and a dedicated communications and engagement professional, and this is what we did in 2022. 3.1 is the appropriate capital reserves. There's quite a bit of work that has been done in this area and is ongoing to implement the asset management program and to ensure sustainable capital reserves, reserve balances for infrastructure repair and replacement, including the development of a long-term financial plan, development of a capital reserve policy, to perform condition assessment on critical assets, fully implement GIS system for the asset identification. So this year's targets include the development of a long-term financial plan and capital reserve policy, and there's some additional work on the GIS implementation project to start with risk and condition assessment, and the first area of focus has been Beaver Creek. I will flag that this work has already started, and we have engaged the support of Urban Systems as a partner to do this additional GIS work. As our existing department is a department of one as well, small and mighty, and our focus has really been on getting the base GIS in place, which we've done, and now we're working with Urban Systems to build some layers onto that base system. Under 3.2, solid waste management plans. This has been a significant area of work for us. It does include the implementation of regional organics diversion, implementation of enhanced leachate treatment for the West Coast landfill, improved recycling and diversion programs throughout the region. This year, we focused on the West Coast implementation. We have started this implementation in December of 2022, and it is ongoing. We're very pleased to have the support and participation of our West Coast First Nations partners as well, both Treaty and Non. We begin the update of the solid waste management plan, and our target remains to achieve 50% diversion by the end of this year. Under 3.3, here we have the acquisition and development of new utilities. Starting with the establishment of a policy that provides criteria for the acquisition of new or existing sewer and water utilities. And given what's on the docket right now, we're really looking at the development of this policy for 2024. Under section 4, here we're looking at emergency management. Under 4.1, we have to identify hazards and risks. Objectives to undertake a climate change risk assessment, to identify areas that may have increased hazards, including those due to climate change. This year, we are developing a hazards risk and vulnerability analysis, an HRVA. That process is currently started, and we've had our first general outreach with all our key partners. And once completed, we do intend to do some administrative updates to the emergency plans. Those administrative updates will be brought to the board for deliberation, of course, as they directly come from the HRVA. Under 4.2, we have emergency response plans. Here we want to keep all of our plans, both the regional and sub-regional emergency plans, up to date. Prior to taking any action in 2023, we do need to hear back from the province. They have flagged with us in 2022 that they were making changes to provincial plans, and we are waiting to see what those are. If I can just put a plug for the ESS stuff, we do hope that there's some outreach and dialogue prior to making the plan final, but we'll wait and see what the province provides. Improved coordination is a key area of our work in this area. Here, of course, we wanted to explore opportunities for greater coordination with First Nations, municipalities, and other agencies. This year in 2023, we really are going to be focusing on additional training opportunities, and we have those opportunities already scheduled. So we're looking forward to seeing a number of those starting with the West Coast. And of course, that does complement the ongoing work that we have for West Coast Evacuation Group Plan. Last but not least, Section 5 is partnerships and alignment. In this area, we have engagement with community partners, This objective here was to engage with the community partners to review respective goals and strategies and identify opportunities for alignment and cooperation. In 2023, we're really looking at some ongoing and new objectives. The ongoing falls under the area of dispersed camping, which is felt across the region, but is quite acute on the West Coast. We have primary care recruitment strategies, and this is a two-phase strategic approach starting with the Alberni Valley. We have inclusive governance and potential conversations for the, conversion of the Cherry Creek Waterworks District as the three larger targets. There are, of course, lots of smaller targets that are not expressed in the strategic plan, but are certainly part of budget deliberations for 2023. 5.2 is First Nations protocol agreements. The objective here was to develop protocol agreements with regional First Nation communities to support reconciliation and partnering efforts. One of the, there are two major areas that are ongoing coming out of 2022 and one new area for 2023. So we have continued work with Tashot regarding the Alberni Valley landfill, now called the Go Center. We are also looking to build relationships with Kauquit regarding the Long Beach Airport. This is something that we started at the end of 2022, and we're going to have our first meeting with them on the 24th of February. And then the new addition to 2023 is Hue-related work with regards to large-scale visioning and development in the Banfield area, which of course is the Hue traditional territory as well. Under 5.3, governance and service reviews, we have the objective here is to conduct various reviews of trails, specifically Log Train Trail, Alberni Valley Aquatic Center, and Regional Transit. So the alternatives that we're taking on with regards to the delivery of West Coast Transit is a bit of a repeat. We did a lot of work working with BC Transit to get West Coast Transit up and running. Unfortunately, due to a withdrawal of funding or a change of heart, shall I say, from the province in terms of funding the expansion, we're now back at a table looking at alternatives that we can implement on the West Coast. So it's a lot of new work that unfortunately had already been done. Now it's being done differently. With the update regional trails, here again, looking at the Log Train Trail in the Alberni Valley, but also looking at the West Coast multi-use path on the West Coast. We unfortunately did not get federal grants for that. We're hopeful that we will get provincial. In the absence of either of those or both, we're back to talking about other grant sources which are available to us should we choose to direct them towards that project. The other area is the Alberni Valley Aquatic Center, which we've hired a consultant to lead the engagement process. We have identified a consultation group internal to the organization and within the community. And we're looking to do this work in 2023 so that we can conclude the work for larger discussions in 2024. And of course, regional transit in the Alberni Valley is an area of review. It's due for its review this year. And we have set the table with BC Transit to revisit both regular and the handy-barrett transit that is provided here in the Alberni Valley. 5.4 is interregional planning. And here we wanted to convene interregional planning session for the following the 2022 election. And we're really looking at collaboration of joint planning with treaty and non-treaty nations, of which Hue is the first that we've already flagged, and also some interregional strategic planning sessions that we have pushed our strategic planning here for the ACRD. We pushed that to May, and we're hoping that allows us to use March and April to have discussion with our neighboring partners and members. So that we can better understand their plans prior to formalizing a review of this plan. That concludes my overview, and over to Hospital District with you, Terry.
Great, thank you. Okay,
Director Cote?
Do we keep our questions till the end or can we start now?
I am happy to take questions on the strategic plan I think it probably makes sense at the end of every section, take questions. Otherwise, we are going to lose them by the time we get to the afternoon.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions. In 5.1, I don't see anything about Central Lake water. And I'm just wondering if that's happened or where we're in that process.
I will write that one down. That would be a good question for Jenny Brunn, our GM of Community Services, and she'll be here in the afternoon. So I'll write that one down so we don't lose it for then.
Okay, yeah, because that's been in the works for quite some time. And,
Yeah.
when it's going to be finalized, I haven't had an update on that for a long time. So I want to make sure that it doesn't get lost. I know that just to add that Bob's Rock is coming forward. There's going to be a request to add that to the strategic plan for 2023. And then 5.4, just wondering, so working with non-treaty nations, that's part of the plan to move forwards also, right? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, that's correct. So we have discussion going in every direction with everyone. And so our intent is to be able to bring back their strategic objectives so that we can at least consider any win-wins that are going on as we review our strategic plan. It is also an item that I bring up regularly with my counterparts, being other CAOs and executive directors with the nations. So we meet every second month, and so this is an ongoing area of discussions.
Director Sager, you have a question?
Hi. Yeah, I was. Did I hear right that we didn't get the grants for the bike connector on the West Coast bike path?
That's correct. We did not get the federal grant. So we had submitted a federal grant, I think for the sixth time, for $300,000. And that grant was denied. We have not heard back from the province. Our request to the province is $500,000. And so if we get that grant, then we'll certainly be back at this table talking about how to come up with the lacking $300,000. We do have solutions identified at a staff level, but we're waiting to hear from the province before we bring it for board deliberation.
Go ahead, Director Sega.
What about asking the Ministry of Transportation to address at least temporarily the issue with widening that stretch of highway, because it is a danger. And it, like, we have a bike rental business right at the junction, and the road narrows right down.
That certainly is a consideration. And so I've just made note of it, Director Siga, and I will bring it back to staff. I think we still want to hear from the province first in terms of the actual grant, because we've done all the engineering, and that project is ready for tender. So if we get those funds, then we would want to advance sooner rather than later to get the work done.
Thank you.
Director McEwen?
Yes, thank you. To Director Siga's question, our CAO has been in conversation with the Ministry of Transportation. They are going to redo the two islands at the junction, and they are going to put a crosswalk in at a strategic point. So they are working on that intersection right now.
That's great news. Any more questions before we move on? Perfect. Go ahead, Terry.
Okay, thank you. So before we jump into Regional Hospital District, I just kind of thought we talk a little bit about how the day is going to go. And I do think leaving the questions to the end of each section will probably be a great idea. There is a lot of content to cover today. Again, this is only our first crack at just trying to get everything to you guys at one time so that we can see it. The more technical, in-depth kind of discussion, I think, especially for the services that are like cross jurisdiction would be good at the committee level, where we have the participants who are paying for it to kind of dive deeper into those topics. But definitely happy to take any question, especially something that you think we aren't going to know the answer to off the top of our heads, because if we need to bring back reports for certain discussion, it's going to be easier to know that earlier so that we're bringing you guys the right information to the right meeting. So please feel free to ask questions. As a staff, we've kind of struggled about with being a new board and still kind of in that orientation phase of life, how much do we discuss about like what that service actually is versus what is the budget for this year. So we've tried to focus more on the budget aspects, but obviously questions about how the service, what it actually delivers, what is our level of service are definitely welcome. So we're going to get the hospital district out of the way, partly because I don't have a lot of information yet. So the regional hospital district is a funding mechanism for like the bricks and mortar portion of the hospital facilities in our region. So we share 40% of the capital costs for the buildings that are in our region. We do not provide operating funds for Island Health. Every year, Island Health provides us a letter that requests their equipment and major project money that they would like for the year. They have had some staff turnover and are still struggling to get those letters out the door. So we haven't seen what their request is. Our base request or our base budget that we've given them is always $550,000. And so I have created the budget with that 550 in there. And then I put the remainder, leaving the tax requisition flat at 1.836 million. I put the remainder into the Tofino General Hospital Reserve, which is based on previous direction from the board. I'm happy to discuss, but I think that we need to kind of wait to see what Island Health's request is before we can really determine what we want to do with this. So that will be coming for sure to the March 8th Regional Hospital District discussion. The good news is the West Coast General Hospital debt for the original building of the hospital, there's like $37,000 remaining, which are in some loans that are actually more like a mortgage, which isn't how local governments do business anymore. So that debt is paid off almost in its entirety. So that's good news. So unless there's any questions about the hospital district, we'll just stay with that.
No questions. Move on,
Okay,
Terry.
good stuff. All right, so now I'm going to pass it over to Mike Erk, who is the GM of Planning and Development, to go through their department.
Thanks, everybody. So I'm going to provide the overview for the budgets within our department here. And so I'm going to cover regional planning, rural planning, building inspection, and bylaw enforcement. And property maintenance also falls within the department for that. Terry will cover off the budgets related to that sort of through the various services. But wait, I got it here. Where are we? Yeah, stop touching. I'm gonna just do that button.
And then just this thing.
There we go. Okay, so I'm just going to start with regional planning. So this regional planning deals with applications and referrals, and I'm just going to refer to it as a core service. There's certain things that regional districts must do, and this falls under one of the things that we have to do. And just a summary for this year within this area, and it covers off like ALC applications, crown land lease referrals, miscellaneous water referrals. So we will get referrals about water licenses, mining, liquor licenses, and other land use on provincial land. Cannabis retail, we had 35 applications this year, and it also includes the subdivision applications. And I just want to touch a little bit on the subdivision part. So within regional districts, subdivisions are approved by the provincial approving officer, but the ACRD, and the provincial approving officer is with the Ministry of Transportation. The regional district does have a role in this, and planning staff do work with the ministry staff on the conditions of the subdivision approval, and we also have to confirm ACRD bylaw requirements around zoning, frontage waivers, parkland, servicing, etc. Then we also deal with agricultural land commission applications. Those relate to subdivisions within the ALR, non-farm use applications. So if somebody wants to run a business that's not permitted in the ALR, for example, soil deposit exclusion applications, inclusion applications, those don't happen very often. And I do want to note that there's been some recent changes with the land commission. So exclusion applications are almost primarily dealt with by the regional district. So the regional district would be the applicant. If a private landowner wanted to exclude land from the ALR, the way the legislation, provincial legislation has been drafted, the ACRD board would have to decide to make the application on behalf of the private owner and then proceed. So that's, one of the provincial legislative changes that's come on us. And the example we've had is recently with McLean's Mill. So, yeah, again, private owners cannot apply to exclude land from the ALR. Press the right button. So just on this slide, I just want to talk about some ACRD initiatives under regional planning. And really this area recently has focused a lot on agriculture, and it includes our systems change that Daniel had mentioned. We have a ACRD has a $300,000 grant from the Vancouver Foundation. We've also had, and all of these have been funded through grants. We've been working on water issues with agriculture and had set up a committee, a water council for agriculture. Recently had some funding to support a meat processing training. So we do that in conjunction with North Island College, and that is run out of the Doc Plus. Last year it was a seafood processing course that was done. And then we want to explore options for expanding sort of the non-traditional initiatives. So there's a coastal roundtable that deals with agriculture on the West Coast, and we want to focus this year on looking at opportunities to do more work in the Banfield area, as well as around First Nations work and food sustainability options within agriculture, both traditional and non-traditional. I do want to note that there's 3 committees related to this service. We have the Agricultural Development Committee, which focuses on the economic development sort of opportunities for agriculture. We have an Agriculture Advisory Committee, which deals with agriculture-related applications. And we also have the Coastal Roundtable, which is for the West Coast. And we will also continue working with dispersed camping and participating in the working group. And there's some funding, again, allocated in this budget for the board to review. And this, as Daniel had mentioned earlier, focuses mainly on the West Coast and the area in Area C between Tofino and Ucluelet around Kennedy Lake is where the most problems have occurred. We have done some work around other areas, including within the Alberta Valley, but those issues seem to have resolved themselves. But we continue to monitor them. So before I go on to rural planning, did anybody have any questions about the regional planning? Yes, Director Boyko? Or, yeah.
Dispersed camping, Kennedy Lake, is that like not allowed anymore? So as long as when I was a child growing up here, we go there to camp all the time. I understand that people are making a mess and all that kind of stuff, but is that basically the initiative now that that's not allowed, or how is that managed?
I'll touch on it a little bit, or unless Daniel, you want to jump in?
I can jump in on that one. So it is permitted, and the province weighed in to make sure in the chaos that was going on, they provided the clarity that you're allowed in the backcountry camping at the same location for up to 14 days. The dispersed camping initiative is really around coordination of all the parties involved, Tofino, Ucluelet, the Nations, Parks Canada, the Tourism Association. So there's 18 interested parties that are at the table. And we first talked about the problems and how to mitigate them. So we tackled things like social media, making sure the sites were clear on information that was being advertised out, and a big know before you go campaign so that people knew their responsibilities. Last year, we piloted an initiative to have the guardians from the Tlaoquit Nation equipped to go into the backcountry, just to educate people and to report back out. We didn't have enough forestry people or RCMP to enforce the problems. And so all they did was educate, report it back out, and then enforcement was from other agencies. That was successful. And the Premier's office provided a $120,000 grant to ensure that we could do that again this year. And so that's where that's at. You're allowed, you have to do it properly, and we're monitoring particularly for hazmat and forest fire.
Thank you very much. It's just interesting that I'm here and I go back and forth there twice a week sometimes, and I haven't heard anything about that. Maybe something could be changed with that.
Just for everyone's knowledge, we typically start our campaigns for May long weekend, and then we carry them through to September. Then it goes quiet again, and so you will see right now we had our first meeting of the year again, and we're just talking about signage. Last year, everyone did their own thing. We talked, but they all did their own thing. This year, the three of the nations, so Ucluelet, Tlaoquit, and Tlaoquit, are looking to coordinate on their signage, so it's the same look, same feel. We've offered to help where we can, but they're doing the coordination. Then they'll work with the matching forestry companies to get those signs up there. And the new Kennedy Lake pullout as well. There's discussions going on in the province to get the information there as well. But the online campaign and more of the physical presence will really ought to be something you see early May all the way through.
Thank you very much for the clarification. That's all I have. Thanks.
Any more questions? Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'll move on to the.
I'm sorry, Director Sega had a question.
Thank you. I just have one question about the debris that is actually left in the bush. Lately, it has been falling on local organizations to actually go into the bush in the fall and remove that debris and actually bring it to the dump. There are campers, tents, vehicles, motorhomes that are just left there. And I really think that there should be some kind of recognition that it is an expense to our solid waste, and it is requiring a lot of volunteer vehicles and work.
CEO?
That's an excellent comment and question. So it is another area that we saw benefit in 2022 by working, by facilitating these sessions and working in collaboration. So what we were able to do is the Ministry of Forests was able to find, I believe, $10,000 to $15,000 out of their existing budget, which they then we connected them with Redfish, the volunteer group on the West Coast, and they worked together to help do that cleanup in October. There is truly enough, there is a cost burden to the taxpayer on a provincial level, and of course on the local level when we talk about where that waste then goes. But at least the coordination was done. The volunteers are truly volunteers that stepped up to do the work. And what was nice about 2022 is the province was actually able to offset a significant portion of costs. So at least things like tow trucks and additional equipment required, and the hiring of proper hazmat. We do not want volunteers handling waste, particularly human waste or drug paraphernalia. So that is a hazmat contract that takes place. But the rest, I think Director Steer said it yesterday. He's not here today, but volunteerism, thankfully, is alive and well on the West Coast, and we were able to complement with some cash.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Great, go ahead, Mike.
Okay, thank you. Good questions. So just want to move on to the rural planning component. So this is again, we refer to it as a core service, and it includes the electoral areas and sometimes Tofino. So Tofino pays to participate in any of the Part 14 or the rural planning applications or bylaws that apply in Lake West Sound. So you will see that on the agenda sometimes, where it's EA directors and Tofino for Lake West Sound type applications. So, I just want to talk about development applications to start. So this is again the primary focus, or takes up the primary amount of the significant amount of time in this service, and we do a lot of reviews of development applications. Some that come to the board, some that are just reviewed by individual directors, depending on what they are. So, but we do this by coordinating with the property owners on application details, often engaging with our advisory, are always engaging with our advisory planning commissions, conducting public hearings, managing the application process, and engaging with outside agencies. I would note that application numbers are up over the last number of years, 2022 and 2021, when we saw significant increases in applications and also in the values of things that we were dealing with in the property values. And I just would note for this upcoming year that we anticipate the development permit applications will increase, and that will be as a result of the Sprout Lake, or the changes in the development permit areas that we're anticipating that are part of the draft plan for Sprout Lake. Sorry, and if those changes are adopted in the new bylaw, we will be seeing more development applications. And I just want to also note that based on the current applications that we received in 2022, between the applications and the required public hearings that we're doing for the OCP zoning bylaw, we anticipate to hold 27 public hearings in this year, and we've done a couple of them already. And the other thing I wanted to note is for development applications that are in process, if all of them go through, get approved at all of the various stages, there's potential for 137 lots based on what we have, really up to the end of 2022. And I did want to note that within this service, a number of the long range projects are allocated CCBF funding, and that's part of the budget process that Terry's identified. And just talk a little bit about priorities and projects for 2023, and really our staff's focus and recommendation is getting the zoning bylaw completed in the first half of this year. It is it's a really big project. It's been in place for 50 years, which results in it being a big project. But our goal is to have this completed in the first half of 2023. And then be moving on to starting comprehensive official community plan reviews for Long Beach and Banfield, and then starting the development plan process for Banfield, which has been part of the board's priorities. Another thing we need to do is cancel land use contracts. So it's a type of land use site-specific type zoning that was done in the 80s, and the province legislated that they have to be canceled by 2024, and they're tied to the zoning bylaw update, but it's something we have to have done by next year about this time. And again, so I'm just going back to my notes. And again, the other main thing we're doing is continuing to process applications. And I do want to note, at this stage that I think part of the review process for projects for this year should be a review of the development application fees bylaw. Our applications to rezone, review subdivisions, apply for development permits, etc., are really, really low and don't come close to cost recovery. And I think that's something that if the board approves, we should be bringing back as soon as possible a review of where those fees are and looking at increasing them. When I get the building inspection, I'll talk a little bit about that That's something we recently did in building inspection and moving towards more of a user pay system. You know, the people that are benefiting from the applications are the ones that are paying for it. So before I go on to, yeah, I was going to ask for questions, so go ahead, Director. Go on. That's okay.
Oh, thank you. So land use contracts, do we have any and what are they? Because I'm not familiar with that.
We do have a number of them. There's 27-ish that were done. And I guess the analogy I would use, they were done like a temporary use permit, but they weren't temporary. So we have a number of them scattered through. So one of the examples is Headquarters Bay on the road to, you know, on the way down to Bamfield is done under a land use contract. So in the draft zoning bylaw that we've been working on, we've created site-specific zones that mirror and allow mirror the uses and the densities and things like that for the land use contracts. There was some things in there around servicing that we can't do in zoning, so they were taken out. But and we've been in contact with all of the property owners that have the property that these land use contracts apply to, which was something we were required to do under the legislation, and we've met all of those requirements. So I'm happy to bring back some additional information if anybody wants.
Director Bourque?
Yeah, I was going to ask about that too. I guess 3 other questions. So what is our priorities versus application backlogs? Because I have lots of constituents asking me, I put in a rezoning application in July and I haven't heard anything, these kind of questions, versus long-term projects such as the rezoning or the bylaw review. The second question regarding public hearings and whether they're required. So under section 464(2) of the BC code, public hearings are not required if the bylaw change or the rezoning fits with the OCP. So has the ACRD adopted that, or is that still not been done yet? Thank you.
So second question first. So there is the opportunity to waive public hearings. To date, that is not something the board has directed staff to do. We've had discussions about it. Again, happy to bring some of that back if that's something that the board would like to look at. We do a lot of public hearings, and there's an opportunity to reduce that number if that's something the board wants. Just for everybody's information, if a public hearing is waived, it doesn't mean there's no opportunity for input from the neighbors, and there's still a notification requirement that has to go out. But that is something we can do. To your first question around the priorities, the priorities that the staff we've always talked about with the board is that, I guess it goes kind of in this order, is public inquiries, development applications, and then long-term projects. We have had backlogs recently. We have a large number of applications, but also trying to manage the applications as we're updating the OCPs and zoning bylaws creates some logistical challenges. And so we had last year at this time, you know, we had set out a plan that would be the recommendations or the timeline that the zoning bylaws can be adopted in last summer, and there were some additional work and changes. So as staff, we focused on the non-zoning applications. And then when we got towards the summer, there was some additional feedback from the public and direction for staff to provide some additional reviews, go out and get some additional feedback from the public. We did do a large number of applications for those directors that were on the board at the time. I think September we brought, I think, 12 applications to a special board meeting, trying to catch those up. But yeah, there is a wait. I mean, it's 12 to 18 months for getting a zoning bylaw adopted, whereas the process, you know, really that I would be comfortable with is like that 4 to 8 month timeline.
No, I agree. So I've looked at other regional districts on the island and across BC, and some of them have set out timelines of application received. It's all public on application received, public hearing, everything like that. And some of them are in the timeline that you talk about, 4 to 8 months or 3 to 6 months kind of thing. So by having it 12 to 18 months, it is driving investment away from the valley as well, because people can go and do other things with the money. Thank you.
No, oh, go ahead. Sorry if that's. I was just going to comment on top of the applications that are backlogged. We're certainly a staff aware of people that are waiting to do things to get the new zoning bylaw adopted. So there's, we've talked with the board about sort of the feedback and concerns residents have, but there's, the other side, there's a lot of benefits that are coming to the new zoning bylaw. If it's adopted, and hopefully when it's adopted, that benefit the community. One of the examples is around accessory dwelling units, or it includes carriage homes. So increasing the area, right? So right now we're seeing people that have been waiting a long time for those applications, and they need to get their carriage home or accessory dwelling built, and we're working with them where they will have an open porch area that, when the new bylaw is adopted, can then be closed in and become part of the actual dwelling unit. So there's it's not just the waits. There's a whole bunch of scenarios that are holding people up. So thank you.
I think maybe we can start looking at maybe the possibility of reducing some public hearings, if at all possible, because that would reduce a lot of workload on you and your staff in the planning department. Anything that we can do to help reduce that workload and speed up processing is only going to work better for us in the public. So keep that maybe on your radar and maybe start doing that.
Absolutely.
Director Ross.
My question too is also about the land use contracts. And in relation to the proposed Maplehurst parking lot, is that not a land use contract with the province of British Columbia?
It may be a contract with the province, but it would be separate from what I'm referring to as the land use contracts. Those apply to private properties, and it's really a site-specific and servicing bylaw that applied to the property. So it's something that would be separate from Maplehurst Park. It wouldn't apply to that.
Director Cote.
Thank you. Just in response to the discussion around public hearings, the board of the day, the previous board, we've had this discussion, and we understand that it's a time crunch for staff, but we also understood that it was an opportunity for public consultation and didn't really want to stop that from happening. Mr. Erg has explained, though, that there is circumstances where public hearing, is not controversial and could be waived by the direction of the director of the area. So it's a conversation that we need to continue. Thanks.
So I'm certainly happy to bring a report to the next electoral area directors committee meeting, so we can have a good discussion about how this could be applied and what the directors are comfortable with.
Director Borko.
Yeah, I agree. It could be up to the discretion of the director, because there's some things that are very controversial and are going to circle back to them soon. And some things, such as ones that happened recently, that were quick, short, and done. So if those things could be identified, you run into the risk of, well, I didn't get a chance to say anything about that, and you upsetting some constituents. So it has to be done delicately if we want to pursue that. Thank you.
Any more questions? Saying none, go ahead, Mike.
Okay, thank you. So I just wanted 2 more slides to go. Touch on bylaw enforcement, and just so staff, bylaw enforcement staff respond to bylaw enforcement complaints as set out in the ECRD bylaw enforcement policy. And typically these are written complaints. So the exceptions are if a director comes to myself or CIO and says, this is an issue and we want bylaw enforcement staff to look at it, or if it's a priority one, which would be imminent threat to either the environment or public safety staff will respond. But we're not out driving. We have lots of work to do in bylaw enforcement. We don't need to drive around looking for extra. And again, we prioritize the bylaw enforcement complaints or things that we get by priority, with priority ones being threats to public safety or the environment. So that's what we respond to. Yeah. Yes, Director Boyko, is that okay?
Yeah, I just had a question when you were done this.
Go ahead now if you want.
So if it's a complaint-based enforcement, people just have concerns about the upcoming LiDAR surveys, GIS stuff of it being done once, get a base case, and then being done annually or every 5 years or whatever it is. And then people can pop up and say, hey man, you put a greenhouse there without a permit. People are concerned about that. Is that going to be a direction that the bylaws enforcement is going to move towards in the future?
Certainly not. And I guess I would go back to the bylaw enforcement policy. Staff would never be doing that. The direction comes from the board, right? So I mean, if we get a complaint, we will use the tools that we have available. When we're looking at things, Street View on Google is probably one of the most, you can see they've got different years that things have happened from actually just driving down the street. But any enforcement is at the direction of the board. I think a good example is our short-term vacation rentals. It was identified as a concern 4 years ago, and the board directed staff to go to identify outside of the complaint process where we have short-term vacation rentals, and then notify them, provide them an opportunity to comply by making an application for a temporary use permit or taking enforcement action. But and then anything that goes for legal action, for example, we as staff must bring that to the board. We require a board resolution before proceeding with legal action as far as enforcement. So the board's involved and sets the direction on how we enforce how HRD staff enforce the regional district's bylaws.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. So the only active enforcement is just looking for people that start up a short-term rental, don't get a permit, they've advertised it, and then they get a notice from the ACRD about 3 days, I think it takes, before the ACRD has ability to detect that this has been started with a permit.
Yeah, and it's probably more than, yes, that's correct. So, and we're monitoring the VRB or the websites, advertising, etc.
Director Cote. Thank you. Seeing what you've got here as regulatory bylaws, sign bylaw, and I'm just wondering, the signage along the highway coming into Port Alberni has, in my opinion, it looks like it's increased quite a bit, and it's all lit up. It's pretty ugly, and we tried in the past for the new members. We tried in the past to have the signs not allowed, not permitted, but they are. So I'm just wondering, has there been any action on that? And I don't need anything big today, but I'm just wondering things.
And I think this is something else. This is another topic we could bring back to the board as a separate report or opportunity for discussion. That would be best.
Director Roth?
I'm just wondering if we ever look at the complainants, because I'm hearing from a couple of people in my area that say, being harassed. So, sometimes there's more than two sides to every story.
I'll give Mike a break if I may, through the chair. Like on the slide, Mike has identified 15 new enforcement files that are open, and we always get complaints that come in. We always seek voluntary compliance and education as a first step. And I think one of the things that we often don't see is the volume of work that goes into just managing one file, because they do ask people that are impacted, they do collect the stories, they do seek to educate, because that is the best way to seek that compliance. But it's labor intensive in terms of our resources, because very often we're starting from a place of conflict, right? That's where a complaint comes in. And so not only are you looking to diffuse conflict between two or more people, but then you're looking to get them to collaborate towards a solution. So by the time it gets to full-on enforcement, there's a lot of work that has gone in before you get to this number 58. So it's just important to know that bylaw enforcement is a lot of just people dialogue, relationship building, voluntary compliance, and that meets the spirit of what's there, but it's not inexpensive because of that.
So I from sort of the discussion I'm hearing, a couple of topics for the EA directors committee would be to discuss around the bylaw enforcement and a review of the board's policy on bylaw enforcement, and also some discussion on options for waiving public hearings, for example, and development approval process. So I just want to note, because I think it's important, and there's hopefully public watching, our bylaw enforcement process is, if we get a complaint, the first thing we do is we notify the property owner and ask. We want to get both sides of the story to even determine if there's a bylaw infraction, right? So that's always our first step, as Daniel mentioned. As was already mentioned, we had 58 enforcement files this year, which is an increase from last year, but we've also added a 0.5 a half-time person to that, so we're better able to respond to some of these complaints. I just wanted to touch on the ticketing, the bylaw notice enforcement. So we have the ACRD has the ability to issue tickets. We have issued a couple of tickets. We're not doing it daily, but those only apply to the zoning bylaw. So other bylaws that we have are enforced through voluntary compliance, or we would bring it to the board to proceed with legal action. That's the process. So again, we can have a further discussion. I'll bring some details on that, and I think Director Boyk will have a question in 1 second. I did also want to mention that we do coordinate with other agencies, and often on things that are not ACRD bylaws, but in the public interest to work on, right? So they may be, a couple of things that sort of touch on different areas. Is there's docks, derelict boats, illegal dumping of garbage, even on private property. So we do work with the conservation and Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and it's a two-way street. They work with us as well. So, and I think there's some questions, Chair.
Director Burkle?
Thank you, Chair. Short-term vacation rental operations are now done with a temporary use permit. It's good for 3 years, and you can renew it once. What options do people have that are in a residential zone to continue on past the 6-year mark? And now I know that the process is to encourage people to do the rezoning, but what do they rezone to? I have people asking me about that, and might be doing things under the radar so they don't get stuck in the 6-year cycle, and at the end they're done. So what options are there besides rezoning if that's not available in a residential area? Thank you.
Other than either another temporary use permit for something that's slightly different than what they were doing, or rezoning are the options. We haven't. I think some people are getting close to that point now, and it's something we want to address. But I would recommend that's tied to a larger housing discussion with the board on how we tackle these things. Because I agree. I agree with what you're saying, and I think it's a concern. And as the HRD, we need to come up with some solutions for those people.
Thank you. Yeah, this 4-year to 6-year thing, it's going to be figured out within 2 years. A lot of people are going to lose their temporary use permits, and they're all going to go underground. And what's the point of having a bylaw? People are going to do it back. Thank you.
Yeah. So the exception would be under the new zoning bylaw. And if you have farm status and you're in the ALR, there are some agritourism options that would allow that. It would be legal. It would be zoned for that on some properties.
Yes, but the majority of short-term rentals are not in that category in the HRD. Thank you.
Any more questions? Perfect.
One more slide and then I'm done. Don't don't move it. Okay, the last slide, I just wanted to touch on building inspection. Again, the last, this ties to other development applications, a really high level of activity. Last year we had the HRD issued 127 building permits and a value of $27.3 million. I would also note that our building inspectors enforce the building bylaw. The board from time to time, and we've seen a number of them lately, sees the notice on title process is that can be part of the process for enforcing where there's non-compliance with the building bylaw. This is an area where it is generally a health and safety issue. I know it focus on safety. We want to make sure that buildings are built correctly and are safe. The other thing I wanted to note is that over the last number of years, this service has been moving to more of a user pay. There's certainly a tax requisition that comes with it, but in 2021 there was an adjustment to how the fees were calculated, moving to valuation that better reflected the true value when the construction is completed, and we saw that corresponding change in revenue and can offset some costs there as well. And just one of the things that's in budget is so building inspection. We have 1.5 building inspectors. One of our building inspectors is half-time building inspection, half-time property maintenance, and we have been utilizing some administrative staff over the last couple of years, and just based on the additional revenue that there's an offset, and this year's budget includes that as well. So I'm happy to answer any questions about this service.
Director Beckham.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Mike, I know we discussed it in the last board, but can you just clarify, because I wasn't sure if I heard it right. Are we cost neutral with respect to staffing costs associated with this function or not?
No, there's still a tax requisition associated with this, so it's not cost neutral. But basically that tax requisition, and Terry, jump in if I don't have this right. That tax requisition, as a percent of the budget, has been going down over the last number of years.
Thanks, Mike. Moving forward, I would be interested in knowing what those figures are, because I really do believe that this should be cost neutral to the taxpayers.
Terry, did you want to add something?
Yes, we definitely are aiming to move it, or we are moving in that direction and aiming to get it to a cost neutral spot. However, it fluctuates from year to year, and estimating revenues for building inspection is incredibly hard, and we tend to be quite conservative with our estimates of revenue. But we'll definitely bring this and as part of the discussion to the EA meeting.
Any final questions for Mike under building inspection? Great.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Can I just ask a reminder to the directors to save your questions until the end, so we don't interrupt the staff and get them all sidetracked and off their train of thought? That would be great. Thank you.
Great. Well, I'm Heather Zenner. I'm the Protective Services Manager for the Regional District. And I'm going to talk about 3 services today that are in my department. So starting with the Alberni Valley Emergency Program, next the Banfield Emergency Program, followed by the Long Beach Emergency Program. So the Alberni Valley Emergency Program, the participants, just as way of reminder, are the City of Port Alberni, Sprout Lake, Beaufort, Cherry Creek, and Beaver Creek electoral areas. So some highlights for 2022, we're hiring a Fire Smart coordinator and implementing the Fire Smart program across the region. And this was 100% grant funded through UBCM. We further implemented our ESS team. We have approximately 21 volunteers, and we responded to 14 calls last year supporting 33 evacuees. And I can say this year to date, we've already exceeded the number of evacuees, and it's only February. We focused on exercising, training city staff, regional district staff, and coordinating with a multitude of agencies. The picture in the slide is a wildfire exercise that we conducted in December. There were 17 different agencies that attended that tabletop exercise. Last year, we also supported different emergencies in the valley. Some required the EOC to be activated, but most did not. Last year, we finalized the Alberta Valley Evacuation Route Plan, and we exercised that to test the plan. We were also successful in getting EOC and ESS grants through UBCM. So we've been very successful the last few years in purchasing supplies, emergency supplies, as well as paying for most of our training through those grants. Priorities for 2023. We're in the final stages of completing the hazard and risk vulnerability assessment. And that's across the region. So all three emergency programs pay for this project. The plan will be presented to the board in April of this year. We continue to focus on training, building relationship with First Nations and emergency agencies. We'll continue to implement the ESS program and develop volunteer capacity. The image in this slide was taken 2 Saturdays ago, where we had an ESS exercise at Cherry Creek Hall. We had over 30 participants. We had volunteers come from Banfield, Ucluelet, and Canadian Mental Health, CUIS, Salvation Army, Ministry of Social Development, Red Cross, NTC. So it was an excellent opportunity to do a tabletop exercise and practice our skills for when an emergency actually happens. This year in 2023, we'll continue to engage with the public through Tsunami Awareness Week, which is in April. We'll do another high ground hike. We'll have Emergency Preparedness Week in May. Shakeout is in October, and then we'll attend other events like farmers markets and the fall fair. And we're hopeful to receive Fire Smart funding. We just applied for that grant in January, so we'll know in the next couple months if we're successful. And if we are, we'll carry out that program across the region. And then for the Banfield Emergency Program, so the sole participant of this service is the Banfield electoral area. So we started to revitalize the program last year after very little activity in 2020 and 2021. We were able to bring on a new volunteer emergency program coordinator in September last year. And he happens to be here with us today. So we've got approximately 6 volunteers in Banfield who meet on a regular basis to support emergency planning in Banfield. So the priorities for 2023 include finishing the HRVA, like I just mentioned. Banfield's part of this project, so they paid for a portion of this work. We're in the final stages of completing the West Coast Evacuation Route project. This was done in partnership with Ucluelet, Uchucklesett, Kuwait, and Topot. And it's for all of the West Coast. It was 100% funded by UBCM. We are actually doing an exercise next Monday, and the plan will be presented to the board on March 22nd. So another priority for this year is to complete an assessment of the tsunami siren in Banfield. There have been some issues with it, so we're having that done in March. We'll continue to provide training opportunities for our Banfield volunteers in Banfield, and then inviting them to any training we do here in the Valley. Another priority is to continue to build relationship with Kuwait and the Banfield Marine Science Center to collaborate on projects and training where possible. And then, like I mentioned earlier, we've applied for additional ESS and EOC grants. If we are successful, we'll continue to add emergency supplies in the community of Banfield. And then finally, the Long Beach Emergency Program. So the sole participant for this service is the Long Beach electoral area. So priorities include finishing the HRVA, like I mentioned, and finishing the West Coast Evacuation Route Plan. We are conducting a large EOC tabletop exercise on the West Coast in May, and this was part of an EOC grant that we received in partnership with the District of Ucluelet and the District of Tofino. So we expect a large number of agencies to meet on the West Coast to do a tabletop exercise and learn how to integrate our emergency programs together. We are in the process of negotiating an emergency support services agreement with the District of Hewlett. We're hoping that the district can provide that service to Long Beach residents on our behalf. And then if we are successful with our ESS grant application, we'll add additional emergency supplies to the West Coast. And so that is all I have, but I would be happy to answer questions.
Any questions for Heather? Director Rocco?
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions. Flood mapping, I understand that we've done this in the past 2 years, accurate survey. It's been done in the past as well. Are we done flood mapping, or are we going to revisit that again in the future? I'm just asking because it's been done multiple times, and
yeah,
how many times do we need the same information?
I'd actually need Mike Erb to speak to that because the planning department's actually done those projects. So he'd be better to speak to that than me, unless you can, Daniel.
I can help with that one. We're still working on the implementation of the existing plan that was just done. So I'm not seeing any additional flood planning on the horizon for us at this time, focused on implementation and further dialogue. That said, a lot of the planning will come out of dialogue with the province. It does tie in with climate change and does come in with sometimes the province will alter your floodplain construction details, and the only way that we can actually alleviate some of that is through looking at a larger planning process. They are expensive, so I don't see them happening on a high frequency. And in the absence of, well, in both directions, the absence of a plan and with the plan, developers usually, if they're arguing, will hire somebody to review the plan or do their own site-specific plan. And others, if there isn't a plan, will hire because it's required in order to establish the right height. So in the absence of Mike, that's the best answer I can provide. But I really don't see it at all within this term as being a new flood construction planning process.
Perfect, thank you. I got one more question. That's perfect.
I can add to that just that there is on the books for 2024 an Alberni Valley floodplain bylaw is kind of what the main identified next step is. And it is in the plan using community works funds, or sorry, Canada community building funds for 2024.
I know there's one, the city has a flood plan bylaw, like you cannot construct or alter buildings in there, but is there, I don't know, or what you're referring to, is that one for the ACRD then? Same kind of thing?
Yeah, it would be for the electoral areas of the Alberni Valley. Yes.
Thank you, Terry.
Director Cote?
Thank you. I have requested that there be a drought assessment done as well to look at the other side of the flood plan. So I don't know where that is in the plan, but we were looking at it. I thought the previous conversation was that we would look at it this year, but I don't think it's there.
The CEO?
I think I think Mr. Erg left just on time. Yeah, the drought side of things is also planning. I know that it touches a lot of areas. Some of the more pertinent conversations that I've been part of is with agriculture as well. As water delivery changes in the valley, certainly being cognizant of existing systems or grandfathered systems is not necessarily something that we want to just decommission because we're not actively using them. There's uses for farm usage, there's uses for emergency services. So that's all with planning, and he'd be best to talk about the timelines as to when that's for.
Thank you. Director McEwen?
Thank you, through the chair. Just wondering if the West Coast evacuation route plan, is that for a variety of disasters like earthquake, tsunami, fire? Does it sort of cover a number of potential disasters?
Yeah, it's general. It covers all hazards. Yeah.
Great. And second question, do you have a date in May for the tabletop exercise on the West Coast?
We don't yet. That'll be decided within the next month.
Great, thank you.
Any more, Dr. Cote?
Thank you. So I'm just thinking that in consideration of the West Coast evacuation route, if Sprout Lake, if the fire is also at Sprout Lake and the highway is closed, there's also the Kurt's Crib that the backside of Sprout Lake, which is identified in our evacuation plan as a route for the West Coast. That also needs to be kept on our priority list because the forestry are talking about deactivating that road. So thanks.
Director Boyko?
Thank you, Chair. I was digging through my father's old stuff and I found an evacuation plan put out by the ACRD in 2011, detailed map. No new roads have been constructed in or out of the valley since then. Are we revisiting the same thing over and over, or what has changed since then that we're continuing to look at evacuation rates? The hazards are the same. We still got fires, still got tsunamis, earthquakes. It'd be interesting to see the plan from then and now and see if anything's changed in the past 12 years. Thank you.
Yeah, just one comment that comes to my mind is the change with private forest lands. But 20 years ago, there were no gates. It was free access. It's completely changed now. So in the most recent evacuation plan we did for the Alberni Valley, it really highlights the gate locations and the process that we need to go to gain access to those lands should we need them.
Thank you.
Any final questions on emergency services? Great. Thank you so much, Heather.
Thank you. And I will turn it over to Charlie to talk about fire services.
Good morning. I'm Charlie Starrett, the Regional Fire Services Manager. I can click through this here. So, a focus change this year. In prior years, our budgets have generally dealt with equipment, trucks, hauls, that sort of thing. The focus is changing to personnel, as you're aware. The ACRD Fire Service Review that was completed in 2021, 2022 came forward with a whole bunch of recommendations, 40 in fact. Staff was directed to develop a 5-year plan from that and accompanying budget, and we've begun doing that. We've instigated, my position is moving to full-time. The board adopted a policy in 2022 for setting service levels, which was a requirement. And the next step will be the establishment of full-time fire chiefs for the volunteer fire departments. The chiefs are currently struggling, and we need to enable them and give them the time to be successful. They've done an excellent job in both the time required, believing what they do. But between their family responsibilities, work obligations, they're being pulled too many ways and are in fact starting to burn out. I'll continue with my notes. Maintaining the present volunteer structure just isn't viable any longer. And the current volunteer chief model represents a very large risk to the ACRD. Chiefs, right now, we're dependent on them giving their time out of the goodness of their hearts and their belief in the function. There is no contract with them. They can leave at any time. That being said, moving on from the chiefs, the departments are fully functional. They will continue to focus on meeting their requirements with us and making sure your insurance rates are as low as possible for those service areas that are served. And on an example of that, we had a call just 2 days ago from someone in the Beaufort district who was looking to move into the Beaufort district, and they wanted to know if they had fire protection. Unfortunately, they don't. The cost difference for them was $4,000 annually for house insurance versus $2,000 if they had protection. So double the cost. Sprout Lake Volunteer Fire Department. For 2023, the draft budget has a full-time position beginning in April. Sprout Lake will also implement a medical and dental plan to address their volunteers and help with recruitment and retention incentive. Sprout Lake is replacing their self-contained breathing apparatus this year. That's already started to happen. It was approved last year. Upgrades to renovations of hall number 3 are well into the planning stages, and it's grant dependent, and it's a rather large grant, at 2.1 million, somewhere around there. We got our fingers crossed on for that. And then a new water tender that was developed and started the process in 2021. Now looks like we're maybe mid 2023 for delivery of that truck. Beaver Creek, same thing. Budget includes a fire chief position becoming full-time beginning in April. Upgrade and renovations to Beaver Creek Hall have been well planned for. We're running into the same thing there. The initial cost estimates were well under what we finally came out to, and they'll be grant dependent there too, as to how we move forward with that in the coming years. And Beaver Creek will begin planning for their next truck, the replacement due in 2026. And then Banfield. Banfield's a little bit of a different situation in that we just simply don't have the base to implement a full-time chief at this point. That being said, we would plan on the 2 full-time chiefs spending 10% of their time assisting Banfield Volunteer Fire Department, the Banfield chief, in delivering their service. The delivery of their mini pumper, which again was started in 2021, we're looking again to be delivered in mid-2023. An upgraded fire pump for the fireboat, which would help them tremendously in Banfield, providing their FUS recommended service, is still being looked at. We tried last year and didn't get any good response back out of the game this year. Planning for the hall renovations on the west side will begin this year, with looking to do some improvements there next year. And Banfield again will start planning for a new truck due in 2027. And I believe that's it. If you have any, oh no, I do have one more slide. It's a new slide for this year. Typically the answer, I'll touch on this one. Emergency 911, E911. We anticipate there'll be some increased costs based on what the budget we're seeing, their preliminary budget, which will come in March. And in March, Director Beckett sits at the table there. We'll have some. We're also looking at increased costs internally with the implementation of Next Gen 911, and most of that will be towards GIS implementation. Many of our partners don't have their own GIS, and it's really been a task for our local one. So there will be some costs associated there. Now I'm done. Any questions?
Thank you so much. I'm going to start off with a couple of questions, if I may. When I read this, I'm actually very surprised that the fire chiefs do not get any kind of compensation. They should be paid because their workload has increased dramatically over the last few years due to regulations. So I was actually very surprised to hear that. And my second question, you talked about giving your volunteers medical and dental benefits. What about life insurance? Because there has been some volunteer firemen that have passed away due to cancers they've gotten from fire-related diseases. So have you thought about that as well?
Life insurance policy we've actually carried for many years. The medical dental, Beaver Creek started a year ago and was very successful with that program, and Sprout Lake's taking it on this year. As we go into it, Banfield may look at it too if they have asked about it. So, and as far as the chiefs being paid, they get a very small stipend to date just to cover their basic costs. But the complexities of it have increased to the point where they just cannot manage it any longer.
Terrific, thank you. And we really appreciate their service, that's for sure. Did you have a question, Director Boko?
No,
Any questions on fire services? Director Cote?
Thank you. Because this is a public meeting, I'm sure that the fire chiefs are aware then what's coming.
The fire chiefs potentially are aware.
Potentially.
Yeah, part of the planning has been discussions with them, of course, and to how to implement this. So
Okay, so this will be a full-time employee of the regional district then? And
the plan would
report,
be a full-time employee of the regional district. Yes,
okay, and report to yourself or,
currently reporting to myself. Yes.
okay. I know I've been asking for at least a half-time payment for our fire chief, realizing the workload that is put on them. Great, thank you. CEO?
Just add one thing, and I mean, Charlie touched on it, but there was a lot of discussion that did actually take place with the chiefs, and we also, Charlie and I and facilitator went to each department, met with all the members, all that were available, which was almost all of the members and officers and the fire chief, to have a discussion around the impacts of the fire service review, the pressures that they were experiencing, and to talk about how best to implement some of the necessary changes so that we could support them in doing what they're doing. And certainly the legislative administrative burdens are some of the largest hits that are being experienced. And bearing in mind that for firefighters, when they sign up, a lot of them are signing up to help respond to calls. And so it's quite a different story when they sign up and find themselves sitting at a desk doing paperwork for sometimes hours on end. And you know, the big question that we had coming out of the fire service views, how do we support the existing model so that we can keep it alive and well for as long as possible? And so what's proposed in the budget this year is really that first key step, because everything goes through the fire chief.
I'll just add to Daniel's conversation there too, that the one thing that became very clear at the fire department meeting also was there's not a lineup of people waiting to become chief. That's no longer the case. Nobody wants the position as it currently sits.
Director Cote?
Thank you. So I have questions around the contract, and will it be offered to the existing chiefs, or will it have to go to open contract? Or it's not a contract position, so.
It is a position through the chair. It is that's a factor that we'll take in camera to start, because there's discretion around how we do that. But certainly working with existing is a top priority. So just for anyone watching fire chiefs, we are not looking to replace them. Like Charlie said, there isn't a long lineup, both in terms of fire chief, but also for new firefighters. Recruitment is becoming harder and harder. And if I can flag some of the challenges that are perhaps a little more acute in Banfield for their volunteers, is housing. It's all connected. And we say it in our motto, and it's very true when it comes to barriers to volunteers. And so, yeah, but the contract details will move in camera.
Director Rocco?
Thank you, Chair. I just have a question. I know a little bit about Next Gen 911. I understand it's a bit controversial. Can you just talk about that a little bit more? Thank you.
Next Gen 101 is a federally mandated service that is mandated to come into effect in 2025. It provides an enhancement to the enhanced 911 that we already have, where you'll be able to initially send a text 911 message to 911 service, and in the future you'll be able to do things like FaceTime with them and send videos of the incidents, that sort of thing, which will then be passed on to the fire departments in particular, so they can deal with these. So it becomes much more normal days. We're used to using our phones to talk with 911.
So there's no way for anybody to opt out of this, in precise locations and video and data sharing and photo sharing with emergency responders. So that is going to happen. There's no way to get out of that.
It's going to happen. It's federal mandated and was scheduled to come into effect in 2023, I believe. And then with COVID, it was pushed in 2025. We're well on our way.
Thank you.
Director Roth?
Thank you. I'm just curious about medical emergencies and if we have any talks going with the provincial ambulance services? Because we provide basically free coverage.
I've actually put in a resolution to AVICC regarding that very matter. Our medical calls at the fire department in the city went up over 20%, where calls with the ambulance services went up just over 5%. So there's a big disparity there. So again, that's another downloading to local governments to handle these extra calls. So I did put in a resolution that ambulance services need to be adequately funded. Sorry to jump in there if you want to add anything.
And fire department too.
I just add that the system as it exists is broken. We're all aware of that. Fire departments, for our volunteer fire departments, the majority of their calls are in fact ambulance assist first responder calls. It keeps the members active and busy and going, and they're happy with it as it is. It does also stretch the function of what they're doing. The cost recovery, yeah, there needs to be some answers there.
I also wonder about liabilities. You know, if there's an error made or something and we're doing it without, we're just doing it out of the goodness of our hearts. So,
Actually, the first responder services are by contract, and we do have protection through them operating within our boundaries. Services provided are very specific, and we have to maintain those. Other than that, we're covered.
Thank you. Any final questions regarding fire services? Terrific. Thank you.
It's just going to take me a minute to get the community services slides loaded.
Here, I have a question about the proposed road that goes from the end of Taylor Arm Drive out to the highway as being a fire access. That's not been discussed at all, or?
It's on the books.
Okay.
We're looking at it. We're aware of the situation out there, so we'll
Right.
continue as we plan along. Yeah.
Okay, oh, right, that's great, thank you.
Is that road just up past the two lines there at Bingo Bay?
It's actually the hydro line that comes in between the West Bay and the lines. There is a down there, and the property comes very near that, so access to the highway would already be established. Taylor Arm Drive is a dead end, and there's a development that's the 94 acre parcel that's being developed. So at the waterfront, it doesn't have a lot of waterfront, but a lot of back acreage. So right from the end of the new development, right at the end of it, the road has to go through to lot 950. So from there, just a gravel road for access for fire trucks up to that hydro. And that would give people another access out from that peninsula, because from the end of Asher out to the peninsula, people could get out that way, or fire trucks. Well, they're not going to send them in, but people could get it in and out. If there's a fire at the West Bay or something, we're cut off.
Oh, 100%. And that's the property we looked at adding fire protection.
Yes, just recently.
Like in the last couple years.
Yes.
Are you ready to go, Jenny? All right.
Thank you. So as I think everyone knows, I'm the General Manager of Community Services, and I'll be presenting solid waste, airports, water, and many, many other services, including parks today. One of the key things we're going to be talking about a lot today is going to be asset management, because we have a lot of infrastructure in all of these services. And we'll be starting with our Alberni Valley and Waste Management Center. So this takes care of the landfill here, which now is the Sort and Go facility or center, the 3rd Avenue Recycling Depot, as well as the Banfield Transfer Station, our recycling collection contract, and education services. So some of the key things that we've completed recently, of course, in 2021, we worked with the city to implement 3-string diversion at the curbside. That was in late September. Now we have a whole year under our belt, and what we've found is an incredible increase in diversion. So we've gone from 24% to 30% diversion for this service. We have managed to maybe do 1% a year for the last few years. So this is going to be a huge success. Those are preliminary numbers, but still, it's just a great move forward for us. For the most part, this service is funded through tipping fees, and we get a lot of money back for selling recyclables. We also get grants, but there is a small portion for taxation. For the Alberni Valley, that tax requisition is going to be stable in 2023, but we are recommending an increase for Banfield. We've seen significant cost increases to do with transportation, contract costs, and so we're recommending a $20,000 increase. Our closure and post-closure requirements for funding are continuing to be met, and those are really important. And if we talk about some of the key projects coming forward, we will be providing, as we do every year, a really detailed report on how we're meeting the goals for this service. So we are trying to achieve a 400 kilogram per capita waste production. We are getting closer to that, again, year by year, as well as we talked about diversion, which is going up. And then we do a lot of landfill management objectives, like trying to optimize airspace usage, making sure we're financially managing this. We worry about our leachate and our gas production. The big project for solid waste this year is going to be a solid waste management plan update. We did our plan many years ago, and one of the outstanding objectives was organics diversion, which now we have finally completed. So we're very excited to engage with communities, talk about where do we want to go, what are our new goals, and what are going to be the projects moving forward. So that's pretty exciting. And in order to do that effectively, we're also going to do a waste composition study. So you want to know what's getting produced and landfilled and where is it coming from. So that's right up front while we start the plan. Those are sort of our two big projects. We also are working a lot with Sashot First Nation. We have a new landfill working group that meets quarterly, and we talk about, again, the landfill. We do not have long-term tenure for that site. And so we want to work with our neighbors to come up with objectives, to come up with a plan to move forward. Oh, that was fun. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, we're back on track. West Coast Waste Management. So this service takes care of everything on the West Coast. We have a landfill there. We have collection service, and we do a lot of education as well. So as I mentioned, one of the big things that we've done in 2022 was rollout of the 3-string curbside program. So that was just in late November. We only have preliminary results, which of course are very positive, but it'll be a little while before we can really report on that. The focus right now is making sure that we're educating and promoting that program so it's being used effectively. So that's a big focus. For the most part, again, this service is funded mostly through tipping fees, money from recyclables, and we do have we also collect fees from residents for the collection service. And then there's a small tax requisition, but it again is stable this year. We're not looking for major increases. Closure and post-closure reserves are also being met, which is excellent. Our projects coming up, again, talked about our goals, and we will be reporting to the West Coast Committee once we have those numbers. Focusing on the education, we're also needing to commission our new organics facility. This is a great photo. We just took this in January. It's an overview of the landfill, and it shows all of the construction upgrades that we've done. So we've got our processing facility and new tipping walls there. It's all right by the scale shack, so we get better lines of sight. Just awesome work there. So we just need to implement that, which is going to have a slight increase on our operating costs because obviously we're doing something new there. We're processing organics. And again, we're going to focus on our waste audit and solid waste management plan. I have a lot to talk about, so I think I'm going to stop between major services to ask questions. So as far as solid waste is concerned, are there any questions?
Director Boyko?
Thank you, Chair. Last year, the electoral areas, Squirrel Lake, Cherry Creek, Beaver Creek, Beaufort, rejected to going into the sort and go thing with 82%, I believe, of the response going against it. Is there a plan to go back into these electoral areas in the future? And then I have a second question about that.
Great, through the chair. Excellent question. So we thought, we implemented the city program, and then we wanted to know, basically do a temperature check of what would be the interest for the electoral areas. So we did a preliminary engagement. Each of the electoral areas we sort of checked individually, and each had differing levels of what they wanted, whether they wanted a curbside program or not. It also highlighted a lot of barriers. Just a lot of the concerns weren't necessarily about diversion, but it was more like, this logistically is problematic for me. I'm so rural. And so we got some really good information. And instead of moving forward with pushing that forward, we've decided that we want to focus on the solid waste management plan next. And then through that process, we're going to talk with each of the electoral areas again and say, hey, what are your diversion goals? We're pretty confident that everyone agrees that we want to divert garbage, we want to do the right thing. So as long as we can confirm that our values are set and that our targets are there, then we talk about what are the different options to reach that. Maybe it is curbside, maybe we won't take it off the table. We'll talk about it through the plan. But the plan is that basically the avenue for us to have the conversation with the community and come up with a strategy.
Thank you very much. Good. I have one more question. I believe, thank you, Chair. I believe the City of Port Alberni has gotten a $10 million funding for a smart city. And because the landfill the city uses is in the ACRD, what is the discussion going on for that? There's a lot of things involved with the smart city, and it's multiple pages of reading to go through it. Is that going to be forced on the ACRD as well? How's the landfill going to be affected? Things like that. Thank you.
That through the chair, excellent question. I'm actually going to have to take that and get back to you on that if that's all right. Okay.
If I could comment on that.
Director Minions was going to raise her hand on this. Go ahead.
Thank you. The city did not ever receive $10 million in funding for the Smart Cities Challenge. There's been a lot of confusion on this lately for some reason. There was a very old page on the City of Port Alberni's website that indicated we had applied for the Smart Cities Challenge, which was basically like a cross Canada challenge for $10 million in all the municipalities that we applied in 2018. We were not successful. The page remained up on our website with a bit of some news articles that created confusion, but we have not received $10 million in funding, and we are not actively working on the Smart Cities Challenge in any way.
Thank you, Director Minions, for that clarification.
Perfect. That does explain a lot of things. Thank you.
Any final questions on waste management? Go ahead, Jenny.
Excellent. We will move into airports. So we'll start with the Alberni Valley Regional Airport. So this is the airport here located in Port Alberni. And the tax requisition is recommended to stay stable again. We've received some COVID relief funding in 2021. It has allowed us to offset operating costs, and we basically have a resulting surplus, which is good for this service. We are lacking a bit of resources to move forward with doing a lot of initiatives here, and we've recently gotten support from the committee and the board to allocate 0.25 of an airport coordinator position to help support moving those initiatives forward. We have a 2021 strategic plan that the committee put together, which helps sort of guide and direct what we're going to be working on. And some of those key projects are going to be working on our fuel system upgrades, the OLS or obstacle limitation surface clearing, working on our AWAS system and implementing the market rate assessment for 2022. We're also looking at lease lot expansion and road and terminal signage and info. We have a long project list. So once we've got some resources to work on this, hopefully we're going to be moving forward on those. Is there any questions on the Alberni Valley Regional Report?
Any questions from the directors? Saying none, go ahead. Oh, Director Cote.
Thank you. Is there any talk about looking at water for the area?
Yeah, so that has come up and looking at centralized water. So when we look at lease lot expansion, that's kind of one of the things is, are we going to just do unserviced lease lots? The current sites that are there have no centralized wastewater or water. There are pros and cons to that. So we need to really look at the business cases. What is the cost investment versus what is the value that we're going to get back from that, whether it's through economic development investment and looking at the future return or through actual lease fees, because in theory, once you've got a service site, it's worth a lot more than an unserviced site. So it's vaguely in the future and on the radar.
Thank you. Any final questions? Terrific. Go ahead, please.
Now we come to the Long Beach Airport. This is a very complicated service, so I'm glad we're getting it dealt with before lunch while you're all still spry and not sleepy. This service, so this is an old airport that we were given from the federal government, and with that comes a ton of old infrastructure. So we have 3 1.5 kilometer runways, we have aprons, we've got taxiways, we've got lighting and approach and departure procedures, a terminal, and we have bunkers. We literally have bunkers from the military that are there, plus 9 old buildings. A lot of them we can't even insure anymore. So the asset management mountain that we're going to have to climb in this service is very high. The other side to that is that it also is a lot of property and development opportunity, and we're seeing a lot of demand for pressure in that area at the airport. We really need to get a better vision and plan for that aligns with what the community, what the First Nations want to see there. So we have a lot of work to do. And as our airport manager always says, these are good problems to have. So what we're seeing, so for this service, what we're recommending is that we look at increasing our tax requisition to put $75,000 towards our capital contribution for asset management. This addition, which is an increase, we've been very successful with grants. I'll talk more about the grants that we've gotten, the ones we're applying for. That's good, but they aren't 100% grant funded. So we usually have to put in some money of our own in order to really maximize that. And our reserves are always very small and we need to build them up. So we are hopeful that as development increases, we will be able to reduce taxation in the future. But currently, all of these grant opportunities that we want to access, we need to have a little bit of money to put forward to make those move forward. We also are looking at, this is a massive airport. We have increased passenger flights, increased flights all over, and we have very limited staffing capacity and resources there. So we have a team of 2.5 dedicated staff that also manage the Millstream water system. So that's not, 2.5 staff. When we look at other airports and how much staff is dedicated to that, it's not only that we're seeing it objectively in our service, especially at this airport, but in comparison, we are running very, very tight. There's a lot of concerns when it comes to safety and Transport Canada regulations. And so we really need to make sure that we are staffing this to meet our base levels to ensure safety. So we're looking at increased costs for operations, increased costs for asset management. Again, we've been very successful, especially last year for grants. We did an upgrade for our fire suppression system, which was a huge project, almost $1 million. We were successful in getting funding to do a winter maintenance building, but unfortunately, because the costs have gone through the roof for all of our cost estimates are coming in at sometimes 60% of what our tender prices are. And this was one of those cases. So we have had to give back that grant money because we do not have the matching funds to proceed at this time. We also received $3 million to put in a perimeter fence. So that project has now started. We are working hard to get that done by our grant deadline of March 31st. So that is what Mark is up to today. And we, yes, and we've also received recently money from Moratti for doing operational and terminal expansion funding. So lots of grant success story here. When we talk about moving forward, the next big thing that we're working on right now is our partnership with the Tloquit First Nation. I believe Daniel mentioned that when he was talking about strategic priorities. This is going to be fundamental for us in moving forward with land management and future planning. We're looking to be hiring and onboarding an airport project coordinator, which is going to help us with all of this increased pressure for development, and working on the land use management plan, as well as the terminal building expansion and how we're going to continue to meet this increased demand for flights to Tofino, which is amazing. And we also have some grants submitted for a fire flow pump station upgrade. Basically, it'll support the new water transmission line that we put in, the loader and snow blower. Those are both through ACAP and VCAP. And then we put in an application for a wastewater upgrade because we have 4 septic systems there. We're looking to improve and upgrade that. As well, we have put a grant application in for a land use development plan, but we also have backup funding. So that project will be moving forward regardless. And that is for the Long Beach Airport. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Director Cote.
Thank you. So you presented on the airports, and could you explain the budget process? So Alberni Valley is regional airport is paid by the Alberni Valley. Long Beach is West Coast. Strictly? Thanks.
That's correct.
Director McEwen.
Thank you. Through the chair, the new position, that is a permanent position, is that correct?
The airport coordinator position was proposed to be a 2-year term. So we have funding and we've made the budget work so that we can do this 2-year position. We want to assess, probably about 1.5 years in, and once we have a plan to see what the long-term resources are. But for right now, we've only asked for a 2-year term position.
Okay, thank you.
Director Borto.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. You compare the staffing levels to other airports and say we're low staff. Have we ever compared the number of flights we have into our 2 airports compared to the other things? And is there a report of, how many people fly out over time and that kind of thing that we could have? Thank you.
I'm very excited to start working on an annual report for the airports, and hopefully we'll be getting that to the board this year. So you'll see in the coming months, annual reports on our water system, our solid waste systems, and we simply haven't had the resources and capacity to work on airports yet. So that is on the objective, and with an airport coordinator, we think we can do that. Just offhand, I was looking at Campbell River a month or 2 ago, and they're a very comparable airport when we look at flights in and out. Scheduled passenger flight numbers, so with actual people coming on and off, relatively the same. They used to be quite a bit higher, but I think Pacific Coastal's just changed their operating strategy. So the numbers have gone down, and they currently have, I believe, 9 full-time staff operating that airport.
Thank you.
Any final questions on the airports? Great, saying that. Quite a while. Okay. Well, it sounds like everybody's hungry for lunch, so we're going to stop now and take a half-hour break. And we'll see everybody in half an hour. And don't forget, you have a new Zoom link for the afternoon session. A new Zoom link.
Oh, okay, right. Yeah, not that. I'm watching it on Zoom.
Okay, we'll see everyone in half an hour. Have a good lunch.